in these mountains years ago, and his name was Wiley Oakley. Now, maybe you've not heard of Wiley, but I bet you anything you heard of some of the people he would guide even before this became a national park. He would guide Henry and Clara Ford. He would guide the Firestones, the Rockefellers. He would guide people like Ernie Pyle, Kate Smith, Eddie Arnold. And you know what? He had a couple nicknames. Now, I know y'all know what a nickname is, right? But Wiley Oakley was his real birth name, given name, but he was also known as the Roman man of the mountains because he loved his adventures. He was adventure bound, okay? And so he loved these mountains. And he had another name, Will Rogers of the Smokies. You know, and one day a lady asked him, she said, well, Wiley, how come you have all these different names? Does it bother you? He said, no, absolutely not. Because he said, you know what? If I ever get in trouble, then I can always blame it on the other fella. So didn't mind having lots of names. But I want to tell you, you know, Wiley loved these mountains. And years ago, when people would think of the Smokies, and maybe they lived like some of you here, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. And the thing that was so special about this man is when they think of the Smokies, often, the first person who would come to their mind was Wiley. And people came to love these mountains because of Wiley. He named many of the wildflowers, you know, that we have here in the park. But he was a great guide. But one day, Mr. Henry Ford, you know, our first automobiles in America some of them were Fords. So if you heard of Henry Ford, the inventor of the car, all right, well, he was a friend of Wiley. And he said, Wiley, I want to take you up to my home, up to Detroit. You know what Wiley said? Oh no, Henry, that's the outside world. I can't go up to Detroit. He says, well, I want to put you on the radio. And that way people will hear some of your stories and how you talk. He said, oh no, I can't go up to Detroit because if I do that and go on the radio, by the time I get back here to Gatlinburg, my beautiful mountains, there's a good chance that my hat won't fit anymore. Well, you know, Wiley wrote 2 books about these mountains, Roman and Reston, even though he never ever went to a day's lick of school. And he said, I do pretty good when I write. I spelt it just like I talked it. And if you read the books, you can see this. You do need to read them. Wonderful good books. But he said, I did like those other book writers. I put out a sentence, and when I get to the end of my sentence, I put a dot. And that dot meant that I was going to stop, I was going to rest a while, catch my breath, and then I was going to keep going. But I never did do anything with those double dots. What did he mean by that? Anybody, a double dot? That's right. Oh. Well, you know, he would be having all these adventures. He called his wife, Mrs. Roman, and one day they were up at the chimneys having a picnic, and when they got back into Gatlinburg, and a lady was talking to him, they said, well, we saw a 4.5 bear up at the chimneys today. And she said, Wiley, what do you mean by that 4.5 bear? How was that possible? He said, well, we saw 4 full bears, and then we saw a half a bear sticking out of the garbage can. And then he had to yodel. Because Wiley said, I'm known for telling 2 types of stories, true and whoppers. All right, and when he had Whoppers before Burger King, okay? And he said, when I tell a Whopper, just to let you know it's not true, I'll give out a little yodel. And even though he never went to school, all his life he studied. He studied the people. He studied the trees. He studied the plants. He studied all of the clouds. He just was a student who loved nature. And that's why Wiley was so inspiring. And just up until he died, he always wanted to be out on the trail. And one day a lady said to him, I'm going to close with this. She said, Wiley, your first 2 books, Roman and Reston, were so good, and I would love to read more of your stuff. Have you ever thought about writing any more books? And he said, well, as I've gotten on in years, it's not so easy for me to get up and down these steep hills anymore. If I do write any more books, they're going to be known as Puffin' and Blowin'. Wiley Oakley, the Roman man of the mountains.
I got to meet his son, Harvey. Just a joy. You know, you've met people in your life that had that little glimmer in their eye. There's just a little spark of joy or something that they had. And Harvey had that, and I think he got it from his dad. But they'd love to stand on the streets of Gatlinburg and entertain tourists. They had a little shop, and they had a sign, Antiques, made to order. And while they were out there, Harvey and some of the boys would be playing, and I heard him do this song, and I asked him if he would teach it to me. He invited us over to his house. He had it written out for me, and he sang it for me just not too long before he passed away. But I want to do it as best I can like I remember him doing it. It's called Mirandy's Biscuits, and it talks a little bit about the Hatfield and McCoys, because the fellow singing said he shot a McCoy that morning, so that's what that's about. It goes like this. Well, since 9 o'clock, I was sitting on a rock, shooting everything in sight. I shot a coy and a dozen mountain boys. This killing sure gives you an appetite. He said, pass the biscuits for Randy. I'm just as hungry as sin. Pass the biscuits for Randy. Hand me the softest awful meal. Well, then he heard a rifle crack and a bullet hit the shack, and another broke the dishes on the shelf. Well, he grabbed his trusty gun, for the battle had begun, and he knew that he must protect himself. He said, pass the biscuits for Randy. I'm gonna load up my gun, and I'll use your biscuits for bullets. I'll put them varmints on the run. Well, then he poured a ton of black powder in his gun. He crammed those biscuits into place. He took aim, my goodness, what a shame. Bang! The gun exploded in his face. He said, darn your biscuits, Miranda. I know that I'm gonna die. Darn your biscuits, Miranda. I know they get me by and by.